Sometimes love looks like care, sometimes it looks like patience, and sometimes it looks like two people finding new ways to hold each other. When life suddenly changes the rules, today on Mindful Living podcast, we explore what it means to build and sustain a thriving relationship when chronic illness becomes part of your shared story. Our guest is a seasoned psychotherapist who has spent over 2 decades helping couples navigate through love's toughest season. After being diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome in 2009, she began to see relationships through a more intimate lens, one where empathy, adaptability, and mindfulness aren't just ideas, but survival tools. She's also the author of a powerful new book rooted in acceptance and commitment therapy, a framework that invites us to stop fighting our pain and start aligning with our values moment by mindful moment. Let's welcome Lisa Gray as we explore how love can still flourish even in presence of chronic illness. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
No, no welcome. So, Lisa, tell me, when one partner is diagnosed with a chronic illness, the entire dynamic of us shifts. From your perspective and your own lived experience, what's the very first emotional recalibration couples must make to stay connected instead of drifting apart?
Yeah, I think that it depends on, this is a hard book to write because it depends on what kind of chronic illness you have. So for example, in my book, I use the stages of grief as kind of just a framework for understanding the stages that you might go through. And, if you fall off a ladder and get a brain injury, you're going to both be feeling a lot of shock in terms of your entire life changing in one day. But if you have, say, Lyme disease, maybe you have been feeling poorly for 10 years or something, and then you finally get a diagnosis. And that's a little bit of a different experience than something that comes on shocking. So I think that the first thing that happens is just the realization and adjustment that your life is not going to go back to how it was before. And of course, both people deal with that sort of realization quite differently. So it's a lot about communication and just talking about how your lives will need to shift now that something has come into your experience that you didn't expect.
Okay, you talk about acceptance in your book, but how can couple practice its acceptance when without it turning into a quiet resentment or an emotional detachment?
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand what acceptance really means. So acceptance does not mean that you think what's happening to you is okay. That's definitely not what it means. And it doesn't mean that, you're just not going to do anything about it, or you're going to just be like, okay, this is what's happening to me, so I guess there's nothing I can do. What acceptance really means in this context is just accepting in a mindful way that I'm right here, right now. Because I think that for me and a lot of people with chronic illness, the focus is always on trying to get back to something that you had before. And that's a losing battle because for most of us, we will never get back to what we were before. And so acceptance is kind of just more of a mindful practice of saying, this is where we are right in this moment. This is my experience right now. And so given that this is my experience and our experience, what can we do next? Where can we go from here?
I think many listeners might relate to that invisible tug of war between wanting to be strong and needed to be seen. Sometimes even love can start to feel like guilt or obligation. It can't it? So, tell me, chronic illness often changes the body and with it, how intimacy looks and feels. When some of the most overlooked ways couples can stay intimately connected beyond physical.
Yeah, I mean, I think for most of us, we equate intimacy with sex. especially after we're married or we're in a long-term relationship. When we say the word intimacy, we think about sex, and it doesn't have to be that way. So for me, intimacy is emotional, intimacy is sensuality, intimacy is touching. And so there's a lot of things that we have left behind a lot of times when we're in a long-term relationship, like just snuggling or just holding hands, kissing if that's available, sharing your heart, just truly being present with each other, making eye contact. There's so many ways to achieve closeness and intimacy if sex is unavailable to you. And I think in some ways it often turns out to be even a richer kind of intimacy because you're forced to explore lots of different new ways of connecting.
Exactly. So, do you think mindfulness can help partners reframe intimacy not as loss but as transformation?
Oh, absolutely. I think that, you know this because this is a mindful podcast, but it's like so many of us are in the past or in the future, or let's check this box or let's get this done or whatever. And so when chronic illness comes into the picture and you come straight into the present moment, there's ways of being intimate that you can't access if you're not in the present moment. So it's like, I mean, my partner might touch me on the way by 10 times a day, but if I'm not in that moment, if I'm thinking about something else, I'm thinking about tomorrow or what I need to get done, I'm totally missing those moments. And so I think that when you are mindful and you're in the present moment, you can truly kind of absorb every intimate act that takes place, whether that's eye contact or a smile or a touch as someone walks by. If you can really learn to accept those things as like intimate moments of connection, but that happens in the moment. So if you're not in the moment, you're going to miss it.
Yeah, completely. On the flip side, do you think there is a danger in over spiritualizing intimacy that sometimes mindfulness can unintentionally gloss over real sexual or emotional frustration?
Yes. I mean, I think that you're definitely, if you have a chronic illness, almost every chronic illness comes with fatigue. So there are chronic illnesses that do affect your ability to engage in intimacy, but almost every chronic illness includes fatigue. And so you are going to be frustrated with your intimacy. Like when you run into a chronic illness diagnosis, there's no like starry-eyed thing about it. Like it's going to be hard. You're going to have to communicate about intimacy, which most couples are not that good at doing. And, you're going to have to really renegotiate the ways that you get your needs met, especially for the healthy partner. The healthy partner is going to have some anger and resentment about the way that things have changed. So yes, it's not easy. It's definitely, I definitely don't want to say like, oh, just be in the moment and it'll be fine. It's hard. It requires a lot of communication and empathy and renegotiation for sure.
So, when one partner becomes the caregiver, the relationship balance can shift from equal to caretaker and patient. How can couples prevent compassion from turning into control or dependency?
Yeah, I think that, again, it requires a lot of negotiation because what I see a lot in my practice working with couples in chronic illness is that it's very hard, and I've had personal experience with this myself. It's very hard for the person who has the chronic illness to generate empathy for the person who's still healthy. And so, it's like, this is my illness. I'm the one suffering. What's your problem? And the caregiver can get very resentful about that. And, they're also scared about your health and all of those things. And so I think the key there is empathy and connection and allowing the caregiver to have some of their own space, do some of their own things, get out of the house. And, that's hard when you're the one with a chronic illness and maybe you used to go play tennis with your partner and now they're going to play tennis with someone else. But I think it's really important for both people to be excruciatingly honest about what their experience is so that you can build empathy for each other's experience and not fall into a trap where there's nothing really sensual about being a patient and a caregiver. So you have to really be open about what your experience is. And if you have any resentments, dealing with those at the time instead of letting them fester and grow.
So it is how can acts of value-based approach help couples redefine equality when physical capability isn't evenly shared?
Yeah, I think that this is one of the reasons why I love acceptance and commitment therapy, because while the acceptance piece is like being where you are, it's like there's a lot of things that you've lost the ability to do, both together and just as an independent person. And so this is where values work can really come in handy, is like trying to figure out what meaning do you want your life to have? What are the values that really drive your behavior? And so, you might have done something about those values before that you can't do now, an activity, for example, or a goal. So you might have to adjust your activities and adjust your goals, both individually and as a couple, but you don't have to change your values. So in other words, like if your value is helping children in your community, maybe you can't run a summer camp anymore, but maybe you could make a YouTube video on days when you feel good. As a couple, if your value is to raise your kids, to be great members of society, maybe you used to be able to go on a bunch of trips with them to show them that the world is big and, people are different in different places and all that stuff. Maybe you can't do that now. But as a couple, you can figure out how can we still live that value even though we can't do the same things that we used to do.
So some people believe that relationships inevitably become unequal when illness enters the picture. Do you think that's realistic or a limiting belief?
I don't think it's unrealistic. I do think that this is where acceptance comes back into the picture. I mean, the thing is that especially if you're really debilitated by your chronic illness, it is going to be a little bit unequal. Your partner is going to have to pick up more of the slack, say, around the house or those kinds of things. So I think it's true. I don't think it has to be a limiting belief. I think it's about how can we work with this, like let's say cleaning the house becomes a problem. What are our options? Could we pay a neighbor kid to do that? Could we hire someone to do that? Could we have a friend come in and help us do that? So yes, it's going to be unequal, but again, it's about communication, renegotiation of how those things are going to get done, and being open about the things that are hard for you. So, the well partner, the healthy partner sometimes has trouble being open about how they feel because they're thinking, my partner has a chronic illness. I'm not going to sit here and complain about the laundry. But I think it's important that they be open about their frustrations, about the inequality of it, because how is that going to be solved if you're not open about it?
Exactly. In your work, you talk about mindfulness not as a fix, but as a foundation. What does that look like in day-to-day life of a couple living with chronic illness?
Yeah, I think mindfulness is definitely foundational because for most of us, when we get married, we start, there's schedules, there's kids, there's bills, there's jobs, there's all these things. And if our relationship is strong and we're both healthy, I feel like there's not that much time that we just stop, be in the moment, look into each other's eyes, and truly understand the other person's experience. But when a chronic illness comes into the picture, you can't do that anymore. You can't just pass each other in the hallways and both be doing your separate things. Like, you have to be in the moment with each other. You have to stop, empathize, communicate, and truly understand the other person's experience. So you can't do it without mindfulness. You can't just be off in your head or in your plans or whatever and not communicating with your partner. That won't work. You'll have to develop mindfulness as a couple if you're going to thrive, for sure.
So, could you share one simple mindfulness exercise couples can start practicing tonight to reconnect when everything feels overwhelming?
Yeah, one of the things that I like that's often accessible to couples is like one partner will sit and the other partner sits facing the same way and leans back on the partner's chest. So let's say the healthy partner sits in a chair like I'm doing now. The other partner facing the same way leans back against me. We put our arms around each other and just try to match our breathing. So let's breathe in for 5. Let's breathe out for 5. So we're feeling not only our own breath, but each other's breath. And we're syncing up with our partner's breathing. And, you can do this clothed. You can do it in bed. You can do it on the couch. You can do it however you want to do it. But the idea is there's touch, there's breathing together, and there's also being aware of your own breath. And I feel like most people, even with chronic illness and fatigue, can do that exercise because it doesn't require very much energy. It's just a matter of like breathing together and being in the moment together.
Only listening feels so grounding and relaxing. I'm sure that when people might be practicing this exercise, would be more relieving to them. I think people forget mindfulness isn't about escaping pain. It is about learning to be with it together. Yet, many people find mindfulness frustrating and even triggering, especially when pain is constant. How do you approach those who feel that being present that amplifies their suffering?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're absolutely correct. Mindfulness can be difficult, especially with trauma or pain, because becoming aware of your experience can be very distressing. And so I think that there's a balance to be had between being in the moment and communicating with your partner and being with your own experience, and then practical steps that you can take that can help you to kind of balance out the mindfulness. So it's okay to be distracted or to let yourself kind of read a book or watch a show or disappear from your experience for a little while, as long as you don't get stuck there. So to me, it's a balance. You do have to be mindful of your own experience, as painful as that may be. And it's also okay to escape that and have fun sometimes, especially as a couple. Play a game, watch a funny show. It's okay. You don't have to always be in the painful experience.
So, when chronic illness becomes a long-term companion, how do you think couples can dream, plan, hope, and build a shared future that feels meaningful?
Yeah, I think what gets in the way, as I said earlier, is trying to plan the same future you used to have together. And that's not going to happen. So like before this happened to you, you probably had dreams. You had ideas of what was your life was going to look like when you retire or whatever. And it's not going to look like that now. So I think the first step is letting go of the old dreams and plans and saying, like, here's where we are, what's accessible to us now in terms of what we can dream about together. So maybe you were going to travel across the world when you retired. Maybe now you watch, you go to the library when they do armchair travelers, or you join a group where, you talk about places you have traveled. One of my friends filled her room with pictures of all the places that she had traveled before. And her husband like to just pick a photo and discuss it and remember all the good times and how much fun they had there. And so, dreaming is always accessible, even when you have a chronic illness. And, sometimes it's reviewing the fun things that you have done together. Sometimes it's just readjusting what's possible for your future.
That's so human to still want joy and growth, even when the path isn't linear. It reminds us that love isn't about perfect health, it's about shared healing. So, but some would say that focusing too much on thriving puts unfair pressure on couples already in survival mode. How do you, how do we balance this optimism with emotional realism?
Yeah, so we talked a lot about using the word thriving in the title because your point is well taken. Like we don't want to get lost in like toxic positivity. Like, oh, you can thrive even though you have this chronic illness. Many people with chronic illness have quite a reaction to the word thriving, actually, like how in the world am I supposed to thrive with this condition? So it's not about toxic positivity. It's maybe about redefining what thriving is, you know? So like thriving doesn't mean everything's happy all the time. Like even a thriving plant has seasons, you know, it loses its leaves, it gets its leaves back. That's still a thriving plant. So it's like, I think thriving just means that you're getting through it together with love, with communication, with empathy. That doesn't mean your experience doesn't stink sometimes. It does, you know? So I think that it's just a proper understanding of what thriving really means.
What today's conversation really reminded me of is that thriving isn't about eliminating pain. It's about expanding love to hold it. Lisa's story and her wisdom offers a mirror to anyone walking into this path. That mindfulness isn't about fixing what's broken, but nurturing what's still beautifully alive between two people. If you or someone you love is navigating through chronic illness with a relationship, remember, presence, patience, and a shared purpose can still create moments of joy, even in uncertainty. Thank you for turning into the Mindful Living podcast. Until next time, breathe deeply, love bravely, and live mindfully.